Welcome back, treasures. Today I am going to take this old pickle jar and turn it into a fairy jar. So first things first, I am going to cover the jar in this, it's kind of an off-white tissue paper, and I'm just going to use Mod Podge and kind of crumple the tissue paper and then lay it very gently right onto the outside of the bottle. Now I'm being careful not to do the rim of the bottle where the lid actually screws on, because I want the lid to be able to screw back on without resistance. And I'm not doing the very bottom of the bottle either, just because I want to make sure that it sits very nice and flat. You'll notice that I'm not overlapping. I'm just gluing up to the line of where I started, and then I'm going to rip off the remaining paper. And then I'm going to cut off the bottom and around that top rim where I did not actually glue it down. But I did have a little area here as well where I caught my finger on it, and I tried to fix it, didn't really work, so I'm going to take it off. I'm going to take a small piece of tissue and just Mod Podge it right to where that exposed glass is, and then I'll just rip off the excess all the way around so it doesn't have a double layer, and it turned out very well. After that, I'm going to do another layer of Mod Podge all over the outside of this to make sure that it's really nice and sealed for that tissue paper. Now that I've applied it to the outside, I'm going to let that dry. Time to work on the top. I am going to use this aluminum foil and kind of wrap it around the outside of this lid and make a shape that sort of looks like a Hershey's Kiss. I am actually making a mushroom topper, and I'm going to use this paper clip and bend it with some jewelry tools to make it kind of curved, and it's going to help me shape out the very kind of top of this mushroom. So you'll see what I mean by that in a minute. And I'm just making sure that I have a nice curved line and not any straight edges on that. So I'm just going to insert it to the very top of this Hershey's Kiss shape, and then fill it in with some more foil. And I'm using so much foil here because I don't want to use a whole bunch of clay, which is what I'm ultimately going to put on top of this foil. So the foil can give me the approximate shape that I need, but will help keep it a little bit lighter, so it won't be quite as heavy, and help me save some material because the aluminum foil is actually a lot cheaper than the clay is. And you could use, if you had some aluminum foil you'd already used for something, but it wasn't just extensively dirty and gross, you could use old aluminum foil on here as well, which I would have done. I just didn't have any that was okay to use in this project. So I'm just going to shape it, and again, I'm just kind of molding it to the approximate shape that I want. Then I'm going to secure it to the top of the lid just with some hot glue. I just need it to kind of stay in place until I can get all of this clay on here and molded. So that will help. Now it's time for the clay. Now I'm just using an air dry clay on this. You could definitely use any type of clay that you wanted. You could use clay to bake, though if you do use some kind of baking clay, I would suggest picking a different glue besides hot glue to secure the foil to your piece of metal. I haven't tried it, but I imagine it would just get really hot in the oven and kind of run out and potentially make a big gooey mess. So just something to keep in mind there. But I'm just using kind of sheets of this air dry clay and smushing it and blending it to the piece next to it so that it all kind of stays together. And I'm really trying to make sure that I don't have a bunch of lines in it as well. And I want to make sure that I cover all the foil. So that includes this kind of under piece of the mushroom. I want to get the clay right up to the lid piece. So ideally where there's no gap between the lid and the clay. And that's going to make for, a better finish at the end. You can see here where I'm kind of rubbing it and it's shiny. I'm actually rubbing some water back onto it because it's drying out in the process of how long it's taking me to mold all of this clay on top of the foil. So in order to prevent it from drying out before I'm ready for it to dry, I'm just kind of put some water on my fingertips and then run it along that clay as well. And so I do want to get this up as close to possible to that rim with no gap. So I'm kind of rolling out some clay into a little kind of snake, little clay snake worm guy, and then just smushing it right into where that crevice is. And then I'll use a couple little molding tools to kind of make sure that it smooths out and really gets right in there. But I want to make sure not to get the clay inside of the lid because I do want the lid to work. And if I get clay kind of in those crevices on that inside lip of that lid, it won't screw on the jar as well anymore. Putting the clay on this very kind of top part of the mushroom was more difficult than the rest because of the way that it both gets kind of slender and curves at the same time. So the clay kind of wanted to have some bubbles underneath it from where it was touching, or not touching rather, the aluminum foil. So I really had to work that tip out to try to get all of that extra air and bubbles so there wouldn't be that kind of pocket of air between the clay and the aluminum foil. That would create more cracks and make it very delicate if it survived at all. So after I get that completely molded, then I'm going to shape it up and I'm going to do some more smoothing. So I'm going to get it a little bit damp again, and now I'm really trying to work out the really big lumps and also make sure that anything that looks like a crack is smoothed out so that it won't crack further during the drying process. If you've ever worked with air dry clay, you know that it has a tendency to crack as it dries. So you want to make sure that it gets really smushed onto itself and as condensed as possible. And then that will help prevent cracking as well. So I'm just going to smooth all of this out. I don't expect it to get completely smooth. That would take longer than I have time to work with on this. So I'm just trying to make it, smoothed out to kind of make sure there's not going to be exceptional cracking there. Then I'm going to add some, I don't know, maybe there's a name for these on mushrooms, but I'm just going to call them little mushroom warts. I don't know what they're really called. So if you ever seen a mushroom that has kind of the little spotties on it, they tend to be kind of raised up off of the mushroom. So I'm making some little mushroom warts for my mushroom as well. I'm just doing that by taking some extra clay, kind of rolling it into a flattish ball, and then smushing it onto the mushroom top and running this tool around the edge so that it really blends in and it doesn't look like one piece stuck on top of another piece, but instead a growth coming out of that mushroom top. So once I get all that done, I'm just going to work around the edge a little bit, and then I let it dry. I let it completely dry. Then I noticed there was a few cracks in it, which I did expect a few cracks, and so I am sealing it with a coat of Mod Podge before I move on to the paint. Then I started with the paint, and I want to do a few different colors here and kind of blend them together to make it look like the mushroom cap is kind of changing colors as it grows. So I'm going to start with this kind of really rich dark purple at the base, the very bottom of the cap here. And it's going to take several coats because you can see how much that white kind of bleeds right through. And admittedly, this paint is pretty old. Like, I cannot even remember how old this paint is. I've had it forever. So it's kind of breaking down and separated in the bottle. So it doesn't work that well, but I'm gonna make it work because I'm not gonna throw it out. So I'm just going to do several coats of this dark kind of royal purple. And then the next color up is going to be kind of this purple, it's kind of a lilac color. And so I'm not trying to blend them together too much right now. I'm just getting some base colors down, and then I'll come back and blend it a little bit. But the purple is going to blend into this purple, and this lilac is going to take a couple coats as well, but not quite as much. So then I kind of did a mix of the two right on that line, and then I took my brush and kind of put the top of it in the lilac and the bottom of it in the darker purple, and kind of ran it through that line so it can give that kind of ombre effect. But then I decided that was a great plan and all, but without the base colors being fully covered, it was just going to keep smearing back over that ombre blend. So I decided to come back and put more coats on both of my colors before I really attempt the blending. And these little warts, obviously I'm not painting those, but I'm gonna make the top of it green, almost a pastel green. That's what it kind of looks like on camera, but it's not totally a pastel green. It's like a mix between a pastel and a leafy green. So here I am doing yet another coat of the dark purple because, again, it took so many coats of the dark purple. And just some little touch-ups here, and then I'm going to do this darker green. So this is a leaf green at the very, very top here, and I'm going to blend these kind of greens out as well. But let's finish off kind of this purple area first. So I'm going to do my last base coat of lilac here. And then I'm going to go ahead and blend my purples together. So again, I'm doing this kind of ombre-ish, where I have the lighter color on the top of my brush and the darker color at the bottom of my brush. And then I kind of took some paint off and kind of blended it into its corresponding color. So I'm going to do that all the way around, and you notice that I'm doing it right between my bottom kind of little wart bump things, so I don't have a solid way around, and that gives me little sections to work with. So that was kind of nice on the purple blend here. If you're enjoying this video today and you're not yet a subscriber, be a treasure and hit that subscribe button below. It'll help make sure that you can stay up to date on all my crafting adventures. After I get all the paint blended together, then I go back and I paint my little mushroom warts just with a solid white. Now I did 2 coats, I believe, of white over these little guys, and just to help kind of clean up those outside edges that were left from the purple. Don't want to make it sloppy. And to make sure that they were really kind of uniformly white, because all they have before that was a coat of Mod Podge on them. So I don't want them to look transparent at all. I want them to look very solid, like they were growth from the mushroom. To paint the underlip of the mushroom, I put it back on a different jar I have that is the same size, and that makes it really easy to hold it upside down and then let it sit to dry without messing up the paint on the top. And then here is the jar that we made at the beginning of the video, and I'm going to use these copper lights that I got from the dollar store to put inside, but I will need to unwind them first. I downloaded some fairy clip art and then used my Cricut to cut out a little fairy. I'm going to shove this little fairy kind of right between the jar and the battery pack. Not going to glue it so that I can change out the fairy in the future. I hope you enjoy this jar as much as I do. If you want to see more crafts, hit that playlist. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Until next time, keep crafting, friends.